Have you ever felt you're not good enough? Have you questioned yourself and wondered why you're not appreciated or valued for who you are? Now, let me tell you, this happens to young people in early stages of life. It happens to people when they get a new job. It happens to successful business people, entrepreneurs and investors. And I even see this self-doubt and feeling of not good enough amongst the very, very successful people that I mentor and that join us once a year at Wealth Retreat, when people looking from the outside would wonder, why? Why would they think they're inadequate? Why would they think they're not good enough? Look how much they've achieved. Well, that's the topic of today's Rich Habits, Poor Habits podcast. Those podcasts I do once a month with Tom Corley in between my regular weekly Michael Yardney podcast. So welcome to today's show.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect and pass on your wealth through strategic property advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's most trusted property commentator, who has once again been voted our leading expert in wealth creation. That's the fifth time he's won a similar award in the last 7 years.
As I said in my introduction, one of the biggest fears we all face is that we're not good enough. And some of us face it on a regular basis. Now, if you don't believe me, let's just do a quick quiz. Have you ever worried that you're not good enough in one of the following areas? Maybe as a husband or as a wife. Maybe as a father or a mother, a boyfriend or girlfriend, a boss, a supervisor, a manager, an employer. Maybe as an employee or work colleague you're not good enough, as a son, as a daughter, as a friend. See, I'm not only talking about property, about business, about other successes, because if you're normal, chances are you would have said yes in some, maybe many of those categories. But my question to you is, who's the judge here to say if you're good enough or not? That's the topic of today's chat with Tom Corley in our monthly Rich Habits, Poor Habits podcast, where we ask you, are you good enough to succeed? You see, many people believe that others, not themselves, others are the judge of whether they're good enough. But is this really true? Let's go along with the assumption that other people, not you, other people, are the judges of whether you're good enough. And let's see what happens. Let's play a little game. Let's say your wife is the judge of whether you're good enough. It's only fair then to assume that you're the judge of whether she's good enough or not, eh? Since you're the judge of whether your wife is good enough, you can simply decide that she's not good enough to judge whether you're good enough. Can you see you're always ending up the judge of whether you're good enough or not? This is why whether we're good enough or not has nothing to do with others. It's simply a self-judgment. Now, I know you're probably going to ask, well, what's this got to do with property investing, Michael? What's this got to do with business or entrepreneurship that your podcast's about? Well, a lot. There's something called the Impostor Syndrome. I don't know, have you ever felt like a fraud? You know what I'm talking about, like somewhere, somehow, they've let you into a club and everybody else belongs there, but not you. You might feel that way at work, or maybe you're at college or school at the moment, or maybe as a parent, or maybe as a property investor. Look, I've worked with a lot of high-achieving people who didn't feel worthy of their success. As I said a moment ago, when we get into a room with 50 high-achieving, already successful business people, entrepreneurs and investors at Wealth Retreat, this is a theme that comes out regularly. By the way, why don't you have a look at wealthretreat.com.au? Maybe one of your resolutions for this new year is that you should come along and join us on the Gold Coast in June. Interestingly, I was talking a moment ago about this imposter syndrome. That involves feelings of inadequacy, of self-doubt, despite evidence to the contrary. No matter how successful some of these individuals are that I've come across in my mentoring or at Wealth Retreat, they felt like frauds and their beliefs robbed them of their mental strength. They just thought they weren't good enough to compete at a higher level. And ultimately, their bad habits, their poor habits, sabotaged their success. Now, we've all gone through tough times on occasions where we felt inadequate. But what I want to now have a chat with Tom Corley is about whether you, are good enough to succeed. How do you know and what can you do about it? Are you good enough to succeed? Many people pursue success, but very few actually achieve the success thereafter. I wonder why that is. Maybe you're not good enough, or maybe you don't think you're good enough. To discuss this topic with me today, I've got my good friend across the ditch in the United States, Tom Corley, on the line. Welcome, Tom.
Hey, Michael, it's good to be back.
Now, the basis of our discussion really today is going to come from your rich habit study, because I know you spent 5 years interviewing 177 self-made millionaires and 128 poor people. And this wasn't a judge of people. They were your clients as a CPA, and you wanted to understand why some people succeeded and others didn't. And you put that into your various rich habits books and into our joint book, Rich Habits, Poor Habits. So success means different things to different people, of course, doesn't it, Tom?
That's right. So, look, if you want to be a successful parent, well, you have to have certain parenting habits that make you a successful parent. If you want to be a successful teacher, you have to have certain successful habits that make you a good teacher. Well, if you want to be wealthy, you have to have certain habits that help you move forward towards achieving your dreams and your goals, because wealth is really the end game. It's the goal line. But it takes a long time to accumulate that wealth, and wealth and success are kind of interrelated. And what I found in my research is those who succeed and become wealthy, they have what it takes to be successful, and those who fail just don't have what it takes. So the real question is, right, what does it take?
That's a really, really good question. And I think another question is, am I actually good enough? Do I have what it takes? Because there is this thing called the Impostor Syndrome, where people actually feel they're not deserving of it. So to help answer that question, have I got what it takes? I guess there are some questions you should ask yourself, and you've got to be honest about them. So what do you ask yourself?
Well, one of the things that I found is you have to have, the skills and knowledge to be successful. So you have to ask yourself, do I have the skills and the knowledge that I need to succeed? Now, I don't want to paint with a broad brush. If you're in financial planning, do you have the skills and the knowledge to succeed as a financial planner? If you're an author, do you have the skills and the knowledge to succeed as an author? Well, most people don't ask themselves that question, so they don't even think about what skills and what knowledge they need to acquire. They try and get the bare minimum, and the bare minimum gets them the license that they need so that they can pursue that job, that business. What I'm talking about is having virtuoso skills and virtuoso knowledge. So you have to ask yourself, do I have virtuoso skills and virtuoso knowledge? And the answer is no. If the answer is no, then you are not going to succeed until you acquire the knowledge and the skills that make you a virtuoso in your industry.
Skills and knowledge are something one can acquire. There's another trait of successful people, though, Tom, and that's resilience, that's persistence, because along the path to success, there's going to be lots of stumbling blocks, lots of roadblocks, lots of potholes and mines along the way.
Yeah, and a lot of people. This is one of those rich habits traits, or one of those success traits that people say, well, you know what? I don't have that trait. Well, I'm going to tell you right now that persistence is not a trait that is innate. It's not a genetic trait. It's a trait that gets turned on like a light switch. What do I mean by that? Well, the people who are the most persistent are the people who are really passionate about something that they're pursuing. I mean, they're fanatics about it. They just, for whatever reason, they light up when they think about it. They think 24/7 about their dream. They love doing whatever it is that they're doing. And because of their passion and the love of what they're doing, they have this persistence that gets toggled on. There literally is nothing that's going to stand in their way, because they're not going to stop doing what they're doing no matter what.
Interesting that people don't tell about all these hassles, the roadblocks, the challenges along the way. And so when people go into a business for themselves or pursue a profession or pursue a trade, they don't know, they're not prepared for all these challenges. And sometimes you just got to get up one more time than everybody else because they're the ones who are successful. I think there's also an unquenchable thirst for knowledge. Successful people seem to be continuously wanting to improve themselves, Tom.
Yeah, and here again, this ties into your passion and your love for what you're doing. So if you really like what you're doing, love what you're doing, or are passionate about what you're doing, you're going to spend more time trying to learn everything there is to know about it. I know I was a top 10 tennis player in the United States for 18 and unders, and I know that there wasn't a tennis shot that I hadn't tried. I read book after book about tennis players. I learned everything that I could learn about it because I was so passionate about it. And so I had this just unquenchable thirst for knowledge and for learning about tennis. And this is when you get into your adult life, if you're pursuing whatever it is that you're pursuing. In your case, it's real estate. In my case, it's CPA, financial planning, and my author business. Your case too, by the way. So we have just this incredible passion for what we do. And so we spend a lot of time reading about everything that has to do with what we do. And by default, we become virtuosos at it, knowledge virtuosos. So that's the important thing. Your thirst for knowledge, it has to be there. It's triggered by love. You like, love, or passion for what you do. And if you have that, you're going to become a virtuoso.
It's so much easier today. You can listen to podcasts, you can listen to audiobooks, you can read, you can go to seminars. But yes, you've got to keep growing. You've got to keep improving your knowledge. Personal development is important. So what we're really doing is asking ourselves the questions, do I have what it takes to succeed? Should we be asking ourselves the question, am I a risk taker? Because some people are too cautious and some people are overly reckless, Tom.
Yeah, so this is actually ties into one of the myths about wealthy people. The people who are not wealthy, they just assume that wealthy people get lucky. They take a risk and the risk pays off. And what I'm here to tell you is that is absolutely not even close to the truth. What wealthy people do, what self-made wealthy people do, is they take risks, yes, but it's cautious risk. It's calculated risk. It's the type of risk that requires that you do a lot of homework. It's not reckless risk. I consider gambling reckless risk. I consider going into a business that you know nothing about reckless risk. Investing in a business that you don't control, that somebody else controls, reckless risk. So the self-made millionaires in my study took cautious risk. They didn't, spend their money in a stupid way. They were very cautious about the risk that they took. They wanted to understand every conceivable possible outcome. And because they were able to understand every conceivable outcome, when things went wrong, they said, whoa, I kind of expected that. I knew that was a possibility. And here's the plan that I have in place in such an eventuality. So they're prepared. So cautious risk takers are prepared for almost every conceivable outcome.
That's a good point, but you actually do have to take a risk. In fact, sometimes there's more of a risk by not taking action, isn't there, and staying where you are. Now, one of the questions I believe we should be asking ourselves if are we successful is, do we really know what we want to achieve? Are we focused? Because I see too many people, Tom, with a scattergun approach. They try a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and you can't become an expert at one thing by doing 100 things once. You've got to be focused and keep doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, so I call that bright, shiny object syndrome. There are so many people that follow me, that subscribe to my website, and they email me. And, 1 year they're doing real estate. The next year they're doing Bitcoin. And the next year they're doing some multi-level marketing thing. And all I keep thinking is, are they not paying attention to what I'm saying? You have to focus. Look, in my study, it took the 12 years for the average dreamer to become a self-made millionaire. They didn't, become a millionaire overnight. They took a long time. So they, pursued something for a long time, one single thing for a long time. And that's the reason they became successful, is because they were pursuing this thing for such a long time. They became expert, or what I like to call virtuoso, in what they were doing. And you get paid a premium for being a virtuoso. Plus you figure out what to do and what not to do when you're a virtuoso. So they're single-minded really in their focus. They focus on one thing. They don't let themselves get distracted with bright, shiny object syndrome.
Okay, we're asking ourselves the right sort of questions. Am I good enough to succeed? And one of the questions you should really ask yourself is, do I have success habits? Now, if you don't know what success habits are, if you don't know what rich habits are, maybe this is a really good time for a shameless plug for our Rich Habits, Poor Habits book, Tom, because in that we've actually done studies. I've mentored 2,500 people over the last 10 years, and I've gleaned a lot from them. You've done your Rich Habits study, and you've followed why self-made millionaires become that way. And we've distilled that into a great book. You can go to richhabitspoorhabits.com or to Amazon or any good online bookstore or some of the bigger hard copy bookstores and get your own copy so that you can learn to be successful as well. So, Tom, how do you ask yourself, how do you know that you've got the right habits to succeed?
Well, that's such a good question, because most people don't even ask themselves that question, because they don't even know that habits are the reason why you're rich or poor. They're probably 80% of the reason why you're rich or poor. So they don't even ask themselves that question, because they don't really think about habits. But habits can be good. Habits can be bad. So you have to really become aware of the habits that you have. And only through awareness are you going to be able to say, hey, I've got good habits or I got bad habits. Then you say, okay, well, what are the success habits? What are the rich habits? Do I have any of those? That's where the value of our research is. We talk about it all the time. So we give people information. We tell them these are the habits, the rich habits that you need to have, and these are the poor habits you need to avoid. All you have to do is read it, look at them, and say, okay, I've tracked my habits for 3 days. Do I have any of these rich habits? Do I have any of these poor habits? And once you ask yourself that question, do I have the right habits? Then you're really halfway there, because now you're aware of the habits that you have and the ones that you need to forge and the ones you need to get rid of.
I guess all this is happening normally at a subconscious and unconscious level. So these habits are controlling a large part of your life every day, and you're not even aware of it. So if you want to understand more of these habits, go to Tom's website, richhabits.net. You can read Tom's blogs on my Property Update blog as well. And of course, in our Rich Habits, Poor Habits book, and Tom's other books on habits, including the book called Rich Habits. Okay, I think another important question to ask yourself about success, Tom, is, have I got the right team around me? Have I got the right inner circle? Because success in any area of life, whether it's personal, whether it's business, whether it's money that we're talking about at the moment, you can't do it on your own. You need mentors, you need experts, you need family, you need friends, you need people to support you, and you need people to lead you.
Yeah, so I think this is one of the biggest, most important questions to ask yourself. Who is in my inner circle? And are the people in my inner circle, are they toxic? Meaning these are negative types. They look at life, the glass is half empty, everything is bad, everything's wrong. Or is your inner circle filled with people who are upbeat, positive, optimistic? There are many studies which I've cited before on this podcast and in our writing, our joint writing, and is also in our Rich Habits book. There are many studies that have indicated, or the results of this study have said, one of them is the Broaden and Build study by B.L. Fredrickson. That study said if you have a positive mental outlook, that is a prerequisite for success. If you have a negative mental outlook, that is a prerequisite for poverty. That study is an important study. And so what I'm making the point here is you want to include in your inner circle, these are the people that you talk to every day. You want to include in that inner circle upbeat, positive people, and you want to get those people who are toxic out of your inner circle?
Well, a couple of reasons for that. First of all, you have to be positive. So another good question to ask yourself is, do you have a positive mental attitude? But if you're around the wrong people, they drag you down, Tom, don't they?
Yeah, well, that's such a good point. I wish I made it, but I'm glad you're here.
We think very similarly, though, after all this.
So habits spread like a virus through our social networks. Beliefs spread like a virus through our social networks. Your attitude, your mental outlook spreads like a virus. You can get infected by negative people. You can be the most positive person in the world, and the negative people that are in your inner circle will have you within 30 days to 60 days being the most negative person. So you have to be careful who you associate with, because they will infect you with their attitude.
So I think the conclusion of this chat today is, when you're wondering, are you good enough to succeed? In our lifetime, currently living in some of the best countries in the world at the best time in history, everyone's got the opportunity of succeeding. In Tom's study, he found that most self-made millionaires came from poverty. Self-made millionaires all came from poverty, but most millionaires came from poverty. So we've got the opportunity to succeed. You've got to have the right people around you. You've got to develop the right habits. One starting point is asking yourself some of the questions we discussed today, and then become the pilot of your life by continuously learning, continuously improving. Personal development, I know, is what changed my life when I realized that for things to change, I had to change. And I guess the flip side of that is, if you don't change, it won't change either. So, Tom, thank you very much. I think there was some great points that came out of that. And if you want to learn more about Tom and his writings, go to richhabits.net, or please get your own copy of Rich Habits, Poor Habits. Go to richhabitspoorhabits.com. You can read about the book there. You can get your own copy online there. And I look forward to having a chat with you again next month in our regular Rich Habits, Poor Habits podcast, Tom.
Okay, Michael, thank you.
Well, there you have it. We're almost at the end of another show. I always have such fun when I have a chat with Tom Corley. I hope you got some benefit out of it as well. And if you would like to find out more, go to richhabitspoorhabits.com and get our book, Rich Habits, Poor Habits. You can get it as a physical book, as a Kindle on Amazon or in bookshops, and make 2019 a great year for you as you learn some rich habits and get rid of some of your poor habits. This was my monthly Rich Habits, Poor Habits podcast that we run between my weekly shows. So I look forward to seeing you next week for the normal Michael Yardney podcast.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect and pass on their wealth through strategic property advice. If you got value from today's show, we'd really appreciate it if you would leave a review, and we'll read it out on a future show, and Michael will gift you one of his books as a way of saying thank you. Just go to michaelyardneypodcast.com/review and let us know what you think. If you don't already subscribe, head over to iTunes or your favourite Android app. You'll find us there as Michael Yardney Podcast. If you'd like to gain instant access to the show notes, head across to michaelyardneypodcast.com. Watch out for our show next week. You'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success and money in around 30 minutes.